Hello everyone, Reverend Cole here from Selkirk United Church with a midweek message for April 28th, 2021. Over the last while I've had quite a few conversations with people about how they're doing during this time of pandemic. And many of those conversations have involved the idea that perhaps we should all be taking advantage of this time to start something new, or to make a big change in our life, or to somehow transform ourselves. It's not a bad thought. Maybe some of you are even doing that already. I'd love to hear about it if you're willing to share. Anyway, in doing some research for services and sermons and messages, I found a couple of short stories that I thought were a good match for that idea of being transformed or beginning something new or starting afresh. The first is actually a story about baptism, and the second is about cars and us. The first one is written by Ralph Milton. It's actually from his book Sermon Seasonings. And this little story is entitled, God's Gift is Limitless. Ralph writes, I was baptized twice last summer. The first time was in the Sea of Galilee. It was our first night beside that historic lake. And because it was hot and because I was utterly thrilled by the sheer idea of being there, I couldn't wait to get to that water, half expecting to be able to walk on it. Something better happened. I stood there up to my neck in water and looked around and imagined Jesus and Peter and Mary of Magdala and all the world-changing events that happened around and on that lake. And I felt a profound sense of awe and joy that I had received that heritage. And so I soaked in the warm waters and soaked in the history of the hills of Galilee. I came out an hour later feeling, yes, baptized. A week later we were up near Dan, and there in that source of the Jordan, where the water is still clean and cold, I filled some bottles of that holy water to bring home for the baptism of an expected grandchild. Standing up to my knees in the rushing water, I wanted to be baptized again. I was baptized when I was just over 20, but I knew so little then, had lived so little. It didn't mean that much then, but it would mean so much now. Why not do it again? It was not for want of clergy. There were at least a dozen ordained Roman Catholic priests in my group, but I knew full well none of them could or should baptize me there and then. So I cupped some water in my hands and poured the Jordan over my head and face, and said a small prayer of gratitude, and felt a deep and fundamental peace. Perhaps it wasn't baptism. Perhaps it was a confirmation of the half-understood words I uttered 35 years ago. Perhaps it was fulfillment of a promise made by God to when Dave Stone poured that water on my head. That's interesting. Baptism is just once. The confirmation, the fulfillment, happens over and over and over. God's gift is limitless. It's a good thought. I wrote at the top of that in my notes, can you baptize yourself? Maybe put yourself in places, positions, circumstances where God can better reach you. The other article is a little story called Born Again Cars, Turning Back the Odometer of Life. And this was written by Jim Taylor several years ago. He says today's odometers may have more digits than Jim's cars did then, but his analogy still works, I believe. Jim writes, both of our cars got a fresh start last summer. By a strange coincidence, both of them went over 99,999.9 kilometers in the same week. For our Triumph, it was the first time around. For the Honda, the second time. And so they started all over again at 0,000.0, with a clean slate, so to speak. Except that they still had all the same creaks and groans as they had 1/10 of a kilometer before. The Triumph's second gear is largely wishful thinking. I've almost given up attempting to get into second. It's embarrassing to drive a sports car and make coffee grinder noises halfway across an intersection. Any cure for second gear will involve lots of hard work, removing the gearbox and replacing ailing parts. It's certainly not cured because the odometer clicks one more kilometer. In fact, that magic number 00000.0 is a symbolic event, not a new beginning at all. Many religious born-again experiences are rather like resetting the odometer to 0, I suspect. The conversion event looms so large in the spiritual landscape that it seems inconceivable anyone could still be burdened with the same old creaks and groans. Like the Triumph's second gear, our faults are not fixed miraculously. They require a lot of hard work. Granted, some people do trade in the old model completely and convert to a new one, but not, I suspect, most people. That would mean getting rid of the old self entirely, and starting all over again like a newborn baby, relearning all the skills and nuances of life. That's too much work. We don't want to go through all those growing pains again. We did it once already. Can't we just carry on with what we've already become? With a new paint job, perhaps, or new license plates, or a sign that says under new management? But it's still the same old model underneath. It's interesting to me, he writes, that in all his recorded words in the Gospels, Jesus told only one person about being born again. As a general rule, he told people to go and sin no more. In effect, he said, go back to your home and work, continue your regular life, but no longer be subject to the powers of evil. Somehow the exception has become the rule. An insight granted to one person, Nicodemus, an educated man accustomed to thinking in symbolic terms, has somehow become the norm for all. But it doesn't work for all, any more than starting the odometer over again at 0 cures a car's problems. Perhaps a better example for most of us might be those fanatics who lovingly, carefully, over a period of years, restore old cars. Piece by piece, they take something battered by time and rough roads and rebuild it to the maker's standards. They don't expect miracles. They do expect progress. So should we. Jim Taylor wrote that many years ago in a publication called Currents. And that's it for today. I hope you're all managing to cope with things as we begin another period of lockdown and increased restrictions here in our province. Maybe you'll find some time to start something new, or maybe just find some extra time to be thankful that God is with you, has been with you, and will be with you every step of the way. God bless you all, and I'll see you again next time.